Well, we didn't do the intro. We just went live. Hey guys, awesome this morning, Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025. We got a ton of people in the room. Most importantly, we got British Hodl in the room. Let me get rid of this screen and let me see if I can get British in here. I'm not as good at this stuff, British, as other people. Where are you?
Me neither.
Let's see. I know it's hard for me, man. Uh, Look who we got. Look who we got in the room. We got British Hodl. British, what do you think about Trump's tariffs, man, that everybody's in terror and freaking out about trauma land on Thursday? Huh?
Well, you know, I guess we're gonna see. Look, this is the first time in my lifetime, and probably in yours, where we've seen the world or the main power in the world, the US, transition from globalism to something other than globalism. This is a real transition of that. So to me, the way I look at it is this is a do or die moment for the US. Either this works or no other country, or rather every other country is going to accelerate away from the US after this. So this is a very serious moment for the US hegemony per se, in my opinion. What do I think of the tariff? I think they're overblown in terms, or rather, I think the tariffs are too much for the U.S. and what they've implemented. But I also think that they're a negotiation tool. Nothing is done until it's done. So I think there's a drastic market overreaction. But we've really got to wait and see what tariffs are actually implemented, not just what's threatened, if that makes sense.
What would you be doing? I'm trying to get this screen so we're both shown here. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but what would you be doing? I keep hearing everybody say, "Well, I'd be doing something else, blah blah blah. This is a horrible thing to do." But I never hear I continue to ask the question, "Well, Dave, will Bob, will Mary, all you smart people, can you tell me what you would be doing, not that he's doing the wrong thing?" And I've yet to come up with one answer, not one solution that comes up with leveling the playing field. You're from Britain. You know this has
Yeah.
not been fair between any of these countries. It's been years and years that we've been playing this game of tariffs and non-tariffs, and you pay this. What else could he do other than what he's doing?
I don't think there is. I think the only thing that, if you are dead set on moving away from globalization, then this is the one thing that you can do to send that message. If you are dead set in crushing China's influence, then this is the one thing that you can do to send that message. Again, I think that everyone and the market itself is overreacting to the threat. And I think the reality is going to be a lot much more palatable, let's say, compared to what the threat is. The threat is we're going to charge China 54%, for example, right? And really, what the US has done here, which is quite smart from what I can see, is they've said we're going to have a baseline of 10%, which, by the way, is a 4 to 5x on current tariffs. So if they just got 10%, it would be a 4 to 500% increase in trade revenue for the US. What they've done is said that's happening. So they've normalized in the mind of all the adversaries, right? And every country is an adversary in a non-globalized environment. So they've normalized 10% tariffs by threatening 50% tariffs. And what I think you'll see next is I think you'll see all these countries try and negotiate down the reciprocal tariffs. By nature, that will bring everyone to a normalized 10%. And I think that's the strategy. Like the UK is now 10%, right? Because we had a pretty good tariff regime with the US. So it's gone from, I think, 10% to 20%, or just slightly higher in the UK, nothing crazy. And again, if I was leading the UK, I was head of business development in the UK. Right now, I'd be launching a marketing campaign to try and get manufacturing to move to the UK to sell into the US. But obviously, the leaders in the UK are too stupid to do that.
Let's think about that. Would you do that? Because I don't think you can do that. I don't think Europe can do it. You don't have any resources, man.
Well, what I mean is we could tell countries that want to sell into the US that can easily move their manufacturing and production to move all of that to the UK and offer them a tax incentive for 5 years to help that transition in order to reduce your tariff from, let's say, 35% down to 10%. You know, that's a thing that we should do if we were smart in the UK.
Yeah. But what would you do if you were Trump right now? Because
But,
I could
yeah,
actually have a debate with you that I don't think the UK can actually solve their problem.
yeah. The UK is a whole different topic of conversation. I think as far as Trump goes, I think he's doing the one thing that you can do, right? If you've been, so the one question is this that I have that I don't have a clear answer for yet. A lot of the trade imbalance was utilized for these countries to buy US treasuries with. So the money was coming back to the US anyway in the form of treasury purchases. And at the same time, it was strengthening these countries. So the question is the US happy with filling that trade imbalance of purchase of treasuries by just printing money and causing actual inflation of the monetary supply and not dealing with the trade imbalance, right? Because the money has to be printed somehow. Either you send it abroad and force them to buy your treasuries, or you don't do that and then you print the money to buy the treasuries. Because there's no way the market can survive if you don't do that. That's the one thing that I haven't really sort of got a solid answer on yet in my own mind. We're gonna see. But this is, for the record, this is the absolute first time in my lifetime, and probably in yours, because you're a young guy, that the United States of America is shifting from globalism to nationalism, like actually economically making this shift happen. So a lot of this is uncharted territory, and we're going to see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I think, one, this is absolutely the right thing for us to do. Two, globalism is dead, dude. It died when Trump pulled out of the whole international trading function, when he pulled out of the CO2 climate thing, which I actually supported. You cannot be a part of a climate control regime when China's putting up 2 coal-fired power stations a week. That's ridiculous. We also have, the arbitrage that occurred in the analog age, where in Europe, like I think India, Mexico, and Canada will all roll over before tonight. I
Yeah.
actually think before tonight, India, Canada, and Mexico will all roll over and go, hey, we don't want to do this. Why India? Well, the arbitrage between labor pools all over the world, and this is why we're not going to globalize now. We missed the window to globalize because we're going to move into AI now, and we're going to bring everything back into this country. India is going to bring everything back into their country. The UK will do whatever. We'll have new zones, and those new zones will build houses, pharmaceuticals, cars. You're going to use the arbitrage of human labor is literally like this has never happened on planet Earth, much less our
This accelerates it.
and
Yeah.
it is accelerating. And you can't
Yeah.
expect him to be sitting there with some of the best futurists in the world around him. This is why I keep asking, hey, I don't think the EU can do anything. Natural gas prices, I think natural gas is the only thing other than the euro and the pound sterling that's up today. Crude
Well,
oil is down 8%, and nat
yep.
gas is down 2.5%, and up 2.5%. And Germany, Brussels, France, UK, only Norway has any nat gas.
Yep.
So, like, I see this world changing. I'm usually the oldest one in these conversations, and I'm like, you guys don't see this coming? I see a fundamental change, man. Like it will never go back to a globalized market where we're exploiting people in India to do our work in America. That game's
Yeah.
over.
The question is, everyone's right now talking about how much it costs to manufacture, the cost of labor in the US. The question is, in my mind, does this accelerate eventual UBI inside the United States? Because if this does accelerate automation, if this does accelerate AI, accelerates robotics, then what happens to those people, right? If you don't need them for jobs, like what happened with McDonald's, right? As soon as they put the minimum wage up, McDonald's put screens up for you to order from. So what
Look,
happens to Americans, and does this accelerate UBI in America? Maybe that's the right thing that needs to happen. I don't know, but that's a question that I have too. But yeah, I agree with you. I think when I looked at the list, 2, 4, 6, 7 countries were already at the baseline 10%. I think out of the others, half of them, at least 30%, will drop very quickly, and they'll just reduce their. Because remember, they've said it's 10% baseline, which is a 400 to 500% increase to what the US is currently getting. And then they've added reciprocals on top of that, which is what made the market crash. The market actually started going up when he mentioned that 10%, because the market was expecting 20. And then he mentioned the 10% baseline plus the reciprocals, and that's when the market started dipping. So if these other countries like Israel drops its tariffs on the US, if Japan drops its tariff, Indonesia, I'm looking through the list here, South Korea, even the EU, right? The EU is at 20%. It's like if they drop the reciprocal part of it and just go to 10%, this is a net 400 to 500% revenue increase for the US, which is pretty good. So I think,
but
again,
see, I don't think any of it's going to stick. I think all of this is a card game. And
well,
it's basically it's daddy showing up to the party going, hey, this shit stops right now. We can all have fun.
well,
And
that's not
actually, I'm not sure that universal income, I don't necessarily think this leads us there. There's going to be a lot of short-term jobs, man.
I don't know. I mean, look, when you're talking about bringing all of this manufacturing back to the United States and the labor costs being 4 times, 5 times, 6 times higher than what it was, businesses are going to be very interested in robotics. They're going to be very interested in automation. They're going to be very interested in these things. So it's like, what do these people do? Right? I don't know. That's what we're going to find out. And I think
Well, let's think about this, though. Like, it doesn't scare you. You're what, 42, 38?
closer to 38 than 42.
Okay. Doesn't concern you, does it? All this change on the planet, does it actually make you concerned? Because it doesn't make me concerned at all.
No, but I have had a unique life path, right? I've had a unique life path, and my life path aligns more with the theory of the sovereign individual than a patriot, right? And so, from that perspective, for me, my life has always been seeking out opportunity wherever it is. My lineage has been that, right? When my dad's family was kicked out of Uganda because Idi Amin threatened to burn all of the Indians if they didn't leave, like the Jews on the stoves. They had to seek another land, and so it's part of my bloodline, I guess, to do that. So, yeah, no, it doesn't bother me in any way.
But that's what happens, though. So I think that's actually good because you and I are very similar in that. Well, I think we were probably raised quite similar. Like, hey, don't take anything for granted. I mean, it's not just going to fall in your lap. I mean, most certainly, I think you and I this is not going to just fall in your lap. Now, if that means that we have 50 years of people, hey, I'm going to get given something, and you and I win now because we're anti-fragile because our parents raised us properly. I am so sorry for everyone else that didn't have good parenting. Like, fucking man up, man. Man
Yes,
up. This
but
is
but but yes, I completely agree with you. But the middle class is what makes your country strong. And it is what at one point made my country strong. So the question that I have is, does this actually strengthen the middle class, or does it accelerate them into more a state of more, just being obsolete? I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to see what happens here. But it's certainly a drastic shift. And by the way, globalism was the US's business plan, right? It was a US business plan that is now being rug pulled. Everyone's being rug pulled on that, because the idea was that we can get all these other countries to buy our debt by helping them grow. And now we've realized that we don't want to do that. So now we need to go the other way. So the question I have is, will these countries, if they manage to survive, and this is the big risk here, if these countries manage to survive and thrive despite these tariffs, I think that's a huge damaging moment for the US. So this has to work at this point.
Now, it's interesting because I actually don't think this was a U.S. plan. I think this was a neocon plan to centralize all government, centralize one fiat currency, and we're going to control the planet through Google and Facebook and all the other machinations we've run. I don't think this was a solo U.S. thing. It was a EU, and we pulled away from the whole deal. We pulled away from the clean air deal. We pulled away from the international trade deal. I mean, we being Trump is the joker that entered the system that was not supposed to end this way. It was supposed to end up globalized, man. And then Bitcoin goes up and all these other conflicts, right?
But America has a new clown every 4 years. So it's like, who knows what happens in 4 years? And one of the things that really demoralized me in the last 3 months is, number one, realizing that 48% of your country still voted for Kamala Harris, right? And number two, 2 months after the California wildfires, Gavin Newsom launches a podcast and his approval ratings go up. I'm sorry. That just makes
people may need to be punished more to wake up, dude.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know what else to do for people, right? Like, you can't look at Bitcoin. You see the stupidity of people. I am like, look, we can argue over all these problems. It staggers me, the education of humanity.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that there are people who are burning the assets of the one man that is trying to improve government efficiency so that government can look after its citizens better is completely fucking mind-blowing to me. It's just like, how stupid can you get? If the government is more efficient, if the government stops handing out billions of dollars to absolutely everybody, people that
trillions.
are dead, right? People that are dead, people that are focused on stupid things, they can look after their own people better with that money. And the fact that you're blowing up his cars and his assets and a potential vice president is going on stage talking about how he's happy that an American company's share price is collapsing is completely, utterly mind-blowing to me.
Well, this was a comment about Basent made on the Mag 7?
This was Tim Waltz. Tim Waltz was on stage talking about how he gets a kick out of watching the Tesla share price collapse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we have a fight. We have a fight for control here. And if people want Kamala Harris, what do you think would be happening right now under Kamala?
Listen, from my Bitcoin mind, again, like I've said many times, my president is Larry Fink. I'm not an American. My Bitcoin president is Larry Fink. And by that standard, Bitcoin was winning no matter who was in power. The money managers are in now, and that's all that matters to me. So from my perspective, Kamala Harris or Trump, Bitcoin was going to win one way or another. So I think if Kamala was in, money printing would have been happening already, and we could have been sitting at 150.
Oh, you think so? I think she would have been really bad for Bitcoin. I think
I
we would have
don't,
had,
because I don't think BlackRock would have wanted anyone that was bad for Bitcoin.
yeah. Well, let's get to the chart of Bitcoin because I think if I can figure
By
out
the
how to
way,
do,
I'm extremely proud of how Bitcoin is performing right now. Like right now, with the Nasdaq down like 4% or whatever it is. Let me just have a look. 4.7%, and Bitcoin's only down 6.2%. That is remarkable. That in itself, from my perspective, is some form of decoupling that is happening. So when the liquidity starts flowing, you can imagine what's going to happen here.
yeah. What do you think will happen?
I think Bitcoin's going through the roof this next liquidity cycle. And by the way, that indication could start tomorrow because Jerome Powell is speaking tomorrow. So that could start as early as tomorrow.
Why do you think it's held up here? I mean, it's seen 81,000. Like everything's getting sold off so badly. I don't know if you can pull up a chart or not.
I
Maybe I
can't.
can. Let's see if I can pull this bloody thing up. But I've got bids at 79.8. Can you see this or not?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the whole complex has just gotten crushed except Bitcoin. And we're off
Yeah.
0.9%, right? The miners got slaughtered. But if we go to the non-Bitcoin complex, it's gold's off, oil's off, silver's off. Why would gold and silver be off here?
Well, they basically said that there's no tariffs on bullion, which is what everyone was shitting themselves over, the fact that there would be tariffs on gold. But I didn't think there was going to be. Also, gold is a very safe haven trade, and as soon as clarity comes back in the market, gold is gonna take a dump anyway. So the gold trade, in my opinion, is coming to the end of its days here.
You think? I think so too, man.
And
Unless
I'm
we
seeing people talk about like silver, and Robert Kiyosaki had a tweet out about silver going to 70, and I said, guarantee you, silver will not breach $50 and hold it this entire decade.
what would it take? What would it take for gold and silver? What would it take for silver to explode out of $50? You think, which is the
Nothing.
all-time high?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing can do that and the reason is the Silver Institute itself puts out its own data. As you know, I was a gold guy before, right? Gold, precious metal guy before. Like the Silver Institute puts out its own data, which clearly states that the stock to flow of silver can go down from 15 years to 3 years as soon as the price approaches $50 an ounce, which is why, part of the reason why gold had a run for 8 years after the ETF was that it generally takes about 8 years once you invest in mining to actually get gold to sell into the market. And that's typically the life cycle of like a new fresh investment into gold miners. And that's what happened with the ETF. The ETF launched, all the money started going into gold miners. About 8 years later, there was enough supply to keep the price down. And so that's what happened. And silver is much more drastic than that. If the silver price goes to $50 an ounce, the level of supply within a couple of years will be huge, and market makers will know that, and they'll start selling.
What about the dollar, the euro, the pound? The pound's up, the
Pound
euro's
rally,
up,
yeah, pound's rallying.
the
We'll see.
dollar's up, which is weird to me, and the Japanese yen is down 2%.
Yeah, I mean, I think short term, the dollar is the safe haven trade, and so I'm not surprised that it's up today. The pound is up because the UK fared the best in the tariff assault. So I think there's some reprieve there for the UK, but yeah, I think overall this is going to be very short lived, and I think we're going to see a reversal pretty quickly.
Is there anything other than Bitcoin that you're looking at, British, that you think is if someone's out there, they're maybe older or even younger, what else would you be investing in other than Bitcoin in this kind of
MSTR,
pardon?
MSTR.
Yeah. So it's all
Yeah, and I did a video talking about this ETF MSTY. And it's something that I've been talking about for a year and a half, which is the fact that fixed income markets are going to come to Bitcoin, and now they're here. So you can generate a 5 to 7% yield on your investment by using MSTY and selling call options on MSTR. And people are doing that. So I think there's a huge opportunity in the fixed income markets. I think Grayscale knows that. They just launched one on their Bitcoin fund yesterday. I think it starts trading next Tuesday or something. And I think Bitwise just announced one today as well. So all those income funds are now coming as well. So that's what I would look at: Bitcoin, MSTR, and MSTY. I think ETH is going to be sacrificed, by the way, by Wall Street.
Go ahead, expound on that a little bit. Because I own no ETH. I haven't owned ETH in a long time. Don't like it.
Yeah, I think that Wall Street is really good at getting behind a winner, and I think that they saw the flows come into the ETH ETF, and it was terrible. And they basically decided that it's a good idea to focus directly on the Bitcoin, and I think that's what they'll do.
Where does that take ETH?
Well, ETH is collapsing against Bitcoin, so I think it may still go up in dollar terms, but if you understand that true scarcity has value, then you should be pricing it in Bitcoin, and I think it continues down, approaching zero.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually think you use the word sacrifice. I think some of these, I actually think Bitcoin's going to perform once we have a few deaths. Like we need to see a couple of these guys roll over. I mean, there's a couple of them. I don't want to incite, riot here, but there's a couple of these that like they keep changing their story every 2 weeks, man. I mean, their business plans are like, I've been in enough public companies now. I know when you're constantly coming up with a new narrative, it's like, dude, you have lost a core position. You have no first principle, and you're just bouncing around on how can I fucking tell a story. And I don't invest in stories. Okay. I have never made a dollar investing in a narrative. I don't know about you, but I've never made any money on the promise. It's only ever been fundamentals, supply and demand. Do I understand them or not? I'm not going to go chase Newsmax and GME. I don't understand these companies.
Yeah, I think that the way to keep money is to focus on fundamentals. I think it's possible to make money focus on short-term narratives, but then you need to be a smart enough person where you can go, okay, I need to get out now and put it into the main fundamental play. Which is why a lot of these meme coin guys, right? Like they're good. Like if they're trading meme coins, look, you can say what you want about meme coins. I think it's a complete and utter scam, but they're not lying at least, right? Like in the last cycle, you had ICOs and all this other bullshit, and people were lying. They were talking about it having a real use case. With a meme coin, if you get into a meme coin, you're a fucking moron, and you know you are. Like it's just, you just know what you are. So yeah, I think that, the interesting thing about GameStop, by the way, you mentioned it, is quite interesting, is that compared to MSTR, GameStop could actually increase its business revenues quite easily compared to MSTR, right? Because all they need is one hot thing that they can start selling through their distribution network, and it can actually drive up revenues, which Wall Street will understand. Now, the question is how quickly does Wall Street understand MSTR's growth chart and their income, right? But yeah, GameStop's an interesting one. I don't own any, but it's certainly something that I've been sort of looking at going, let me see if it warrants an investment. And so far it hasn't.
I don't understand why you would pay a NAV multiple. If NAV's a real number, I could argue that NAV is a complete, utter bullshit number, a little bit like CPI and and GDP and most every other metric that we throw around like it's got some purity to it. None of these numbers have purity to it. They all change depending on what country you're in, what regime you're in. I mean, GameStop's making all its money from Treasury bills. It doesn't really have an income, but it's very similar to MicroStrategy, and it doesn't have a great. It most certainly does not have a future business selling software as a middleman,
Yep, I can see that.
right? So
Yeah.
if their Treasury Department, if they don't make the same mistake that El Salvador made, which is too little, too late. If El Salvador would have bought 5x more Bitcoin, they would never had taken the IMF loan. Now, maybe they couldn't, but this company could put $2.5–3 billion worth of cash that's sitting in treasuries into Bitcoin. And I think the reason they took the loan, it was there. Why wouldn't you? I would max out all my lending capacity with my money sitting in treasuries, and then I'd start moving over what I couldn't borrow into Bitcoin.
But you got to remember, like, GameStop hasn't been through the shareholder rotation that MSTR went through at the beginning, right? So there's probably
I thought they
shareholders.
got pretty good approval, though. Didn't they get like overwhelming approval to do so?
Yeah, but still, I mean, look, I don't know the inner workings, so I can't really say. But from my perspective, Michael Saylor operated this geniusly because in 2020 he basically
Most certainly.
bought out everyone that didn't agree with him, which was a very smart move. So all of these other companies are going to figure out their path. They also have to come to terms with the fact that they're never going to beat MicroStrategy. So they're literally admitting to their shareholders that we are going to be a worse version of MicroStrategy. And I don't know how that appetite works from an investor's point of view too. So I think they've got to find their unique ways and find their path.
Well, there'll be hundreds of companies that repeat this process, though, and there'll be all companies like that. They'll be kind of lame. They don't know what their future is. It won't be the Mag 7, right? It's going to be these middle tier companies they don't have a clear future. And being second to MicroStrategy is a better future than, hey, I'm following everybody and their brother.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think it would be the Russell 2000 companies that do this. And again, if you think that BlackRock is in this game and all these companies are not going to get a letter saying you better implement a Bitcoin treasury strategy at some point, you just don't understand how the game works. They basically emailed everyone or wrote a letter to all their CEOs and said, you better start implementing ESG if you want any money from BlackRock. That's what started.
Repeat that, okay? Repeat that, because I don't think the audience knows. They got a letter on ESG.
Yeah, I mean, Larry Fink put out a memo years ago and basically said, if you don't implement ESG strategies, you're going to cease getting money from BlackRock. Not verbatim, but that's basically what the memo said. And that was BlackRock's move to move people towards their new venture, which was ESG at that point, right? And ESG obviously failed in terms of generating a return. And now they've pivoted to, I mean, it is mind-blowing to me that we're seeing bears in an environment where BlackRock is putting out marketing saying that, Bitcoin could replace the US dollar as a reserve. This is, a year ago, if we had even said that BlackRock will release a marketing piece saying that Bitcoin can replace the US dollar as a reserve, everyone would have thought you were on cocaine. And now they've actually done it, and now people are bearish. It's I don't know. I don't understand it. It's weird.
It is very weird.
Yeah,
it is so weird, right? Like I'm like you. I'm on these news channels and spaces with really hardcore Bitcoiners, and they're all nervous. I'm like, what are you nervous about?
Well,
like, it really shocks me. I'm like, what are you guys freaking out about? Like, this is what Bitcoin was built for. Like, it's playing out perfectly, except that it's accelerated 4 to 6 years.
Yeah, it's weird to me because it's like, coming from my background, I kind of look at all these guys and I'm like, people that come from my background are going to figure out how to take your Bitcoin, and you're doing nothing to hedge yourself against that besides panicking right now. Like, right now is the time to panic in terms of like, how do I hold this Bitcoin for 20 years, 30 years longer than I thought I'd have to, because now the big boys are in town and they're going to figure out how to take my Bitcoin. and everyone's like shitting themselves because we've dropped from 109 to 85 or whatever, 82. Like it's weird. It's really weird. I mean, like, look how many good things are happening right now for Bitcoin, and people are shitting themselves. It's just like, yeah, I hate using the L word, but it kind of makes me feel or question whether some of these people were just lucky.
Oh, that's the L word. I thought you were going to use the limp word.
No, well, that too,
Lucky.
but
Hey, you know
yeah,
what? I think a lot of people have been lucky, buddy.
I hate to say it,
I
but
think it was a lottery ticket, and now they've turned into, hey, look, I'm a genius, but they don't. I said this yesterday, not that I'm a voice of anything, but it's one thing studying Bitcoin, knowing everything about Bitcoin. It's another thing not studying the rest of the world and how we got here and understand how the rest of the world works. And these
yep,
theories of purity and perfection, they make for nice novels and poetry, but in reality, the world is messy. This is the way the world works, right? Oh, I'm a trader. And then you wake up one morning, you're down 42% because you didn't expect a tariff change. See, I'm not smart enough to do that. That's why Goldman's out there and they got 140 people making, 3 million a year trading this shit. And I'm going to think I'm going to be a genius.
yep.
No, my genius is I'm not going to go fight with a bunch of lions in a zoo. Why would I do that, man? Right?
Yeah, I'm finding it really interesting right now. Like I'm talking to Bitcoiners that have been in Bitcoin way longer than I have, and I'm having to educate them on like how they can use TradFi markets to actually increase the quality and the strength of their hodl position. And it's weird to me. Like it's like you've had all this time to figure this out, and you just haven't because you thought that you were on like some kind of holy path. Like it's just weird. I don't get it. Like it's strange. I mean, like using MST, the amount of conversations I've had with like Bitcoiners that have been in the space for so long on just educating them on how fixed income markets work is is shocking to me. Like it's as if Bitcoiners think that like normal people don't need an income.
Speaking of that, and you mentioned something earlier about holding. What have you learned in the last, say, 6 months about lending? And have you been able to pierce that veil and move into any lending protocols that you like? Not naming names, but are you starting to see that market expand? Um, and then I have a few stories myself that I would like to chat with that really puts us Bitcoiners into a position we've never been in before, which is one, you're going to have to be willing to use TradFi. You're going to have to be willing to lose some control over your wallet, which I think personally is grossly overstated. And like the next money coming in here does not care about 100% self custody. I'm sorry. They don't even care about 50% self custody. Like I have a bunch of weapons. I have one right back here. I do not carry all of them on a holiday,
Yep.
right? I don't bring a 10 million rounds of ammo to Mexico and go, hey, look, I'm going on holiday. I might get hung up here. I might bring some of it, right? I might bring some of my money with me, but I'm not carrying $1 million in cash with me everywhere I go in case the world falls apart.
Yep.
Lending is becoming interesting to me because the rates are starting to get really interesting. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes and no. I haven't really explored any like Bitcoin, like spot Bitcoin lending because my philosophy always was like June 15th, 2023, when BlackRock filed, the world changed. And I basically told a lot of like Bitcoin people that I wish I could buy put options on all of these Bitcoin lending companies because firstly they were lying anyway, right? Because when they're talking about, oh, you can have collaborative custody to lend on your Bitcoin, well, that basically is a cute way of saying that you don't have complete control of your Bitcoin, right? It's collaborative. They have a key, you have a key, whatever. So when I look at like some of these Bitcoin companies that are offering lending at 14% interest rates versus me being able to margin IBIT at basically 50 basis points higher than what the Fed charges, there's no comparison in terms of competitiveness on lending. So, in my opinion, the lending is going to come from TradFi, because they're the ones that are going to be able to insure the product. They're going to be able to insure the asset rather, and that's it. Like I think all these Bitcoin companies are finished, because you just can't compete with someone like BlackRock being able to lend on IBIT. I think you're muted out right now.
Sorry, what happens when the rates come down to 5 to 8%?
Well, if the rates come down to 5 to 8%, that would mean that the Fed rates are probably sitting at like what, 2%. So then you'd be able to borrow IBIT at 2.5% versus 5 to 8% on some of these Bitcoin companies. It's like it's still, and the reason why they can do that is because the cost of insuring the underlying asset is less in an ETF versus the spot. You don't need to worry about any of these keys. You don't need to worry about anything. So it's the rates are high because they're charging a premium on top of what the Fed rates are. That's it. That's really the only difference here. And they're charging that premium because of the cost it is to actually manage that asset in a quote unquote collaborative custody manner.
Well, over time, that is not going to go up, right?
I don't know, because if I'm BlackRock, then I'm definitely petitioning anyone who is providing insurance on spot Bitcoin to raise their premiums.
I think that, I mean, look, I'm actually doing some lending. I need to look at, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm paying too much. When I started this journey a year ago on the lending side, it was at 15% rates. And I was like, I'll never do business with you. I can't even believe you quoted me that number. That is like completely against the Bitcoin standard. This is the best collateral in the world. Okay. I might pay a little premium early in its evolution to borrowing money elsewhere. But dude, rates are down. They've been cut over half in less than a year. So I see the market now competing for lending protocols, for lending volumes. The bigger, the better. Which is no matter. I think the rates will come down, and I think that the cost of doing this will become cheaper and cheaper. Where they're going to make the money is in some of the services they provide.
Do you think the rate, based on what you've seen, do you think the rates come down to match the same insurance requirements as an ETF?
I believe the insurance piece is interesting. You know, it's probably being called custody, but
so basically,
look,
what I'm asking is,
I
based
tend
on
to do things. I'll play with some big, large players to do some of this, to start playing around with a small position to see how it is, and hey, how aggressive. Okay, I like that for 3 months. I'm not going to do it anymore. Oh, Gary, we'd like to keep you on it. I find the rates fall another 100 basis points. I am seeing a lot of competition for the Bitcoin, right? Like they want to make money in this space.
well,
So
it's
yes,
not.
I think the rates will come down at near equal to or below what I can borrow against legacy because of its collateral liquidity.
I completely disagree, but we'll see how that pans out. I just can't see that happening.
But it should,
Unless,
philosophically, it should, because it's a superior collateral, and it should come in as a cheaper collateral, right?
but the question is what can you do with that collateral, right? Because if you're having some kind of collaborative, so are you handing over full custody or are you holding a key?
It's going to be, look, when you do this, you're going to give up control. There's no way you're going. I can't borrow $40 million against the gold sitting in my vault.
Right.
They're not going to do that. They're going to go deliver the 40 million gold, and we'll give you a loan. But I'm in the loose custody of the gold.
Right.
Now, unless you're going to be willing to do that with me, I don't think you're going to be willing to give me $10 million. Hey, Gary, trust you,
Of course not. So in that scenario, then the question is the ETF, is the underlying ETF as an equity more useful and more faster to use as a collateral, or the spot Bitcoin? And that's the question. I don't know. We'll find out. Because I think
you think the ETF gives you more control over your Bitcoin than some type of partial solution between self-custody and multi-sig custody on a lending protocol?
It gives them more control.
Having the Bitcoin.
Yeah, it gives them more control holding the ETF than holding spot Bitcoin in some kind of collaboration, because they have control, they have rights over that equity, and that's a market that's been around for decades. It's not new. Whereas trying to figure out, like, okay, he's going to hold one key, we're going to hold one key, then we're going to lend on this. Now, what if he loses his one key? What's the insurance? What's the interest rate that we have to charge to hedge against that? Right? There's a lot there. And then the question is, okay, so now if it's 2 of 3 and the client is holding one key, the lender is holding one key, and some kind of audit company is holding one key, well, then you've basically given up control of your Bitcoin anyway. And in that scenario, why wouldn't you just use the ETFs as soon as they transition into an in-kind product?
Yeah, like when it goes in kind, I totally agree. And then I think rates come down to, see, I love the ETF being out there because it keeps everybody honest.
100%. You know, this is the thing. Bitcoin companies were literally lying to people by saying that this is collaborative custody. It wasn't. It was, we are going to take custody of your Bitcoin, right? And they were saying collaborative to make Bitcoiners feel good and try and build up their loan book. That's all it was. BlackRock's here to play now.
You think they're the enemy?
No. I think they're just a smarter executor in the financial world on assets than what Bitcoiners are used to or want in the game.
This is the piece that people see, because when you say it about BlackRock, sometimes I look at you on your videos, I'm like, wow, he makes BlackRock sound like the enemy. I don't think that's what you're saying. What you're really saying is, dude, this is a real player. They have monster conviction. They don't ever do anything unless they have monster conviction. Your ESG point. These people moved into ESG so hard, they sent letters to their clients saying, if you don't play, you ain't going to get paid. That's staggering. And then they reversed it. When they saw that trade was not going anywhere, boom, they fucking just exited so fast, right?
And not only that, they've now, Larry Fink has basically supported the presidential candidate who is promising to destroy the ESG model. Think about that.
It's fascinating. Where do you see this whole thing going? Let's give it April, 9 months from now, end of the year.
Yeah, I think we're much higher than where we're at. I always say you got to give a new administration, especially when there's a drastic regime change going on, at least 3 months, right? And so that 3 months ends April 21st for me, and then we'll evaluate what's going on. I find it hard to believe that President Trump doesn't believe that asset prices are intrinsically linked to the success of his presidency. I find that hard to believe when people say he doesn't care, right? I think that's stupid. I think he absolutely cares. But in the short term, corrections have to be made, and those corrections will be painful. And that's what we're going through right now. And again, it's like 2 months and 1 week since he took office. How about we just fucking relax? In that 2 months and 1 week, by the way, they have basically launched a Bitcoin strategic reserve and told you that they are focused on buying Bitcoin in a budget neutral way, while a bill is going through Congress, which basically states they're going to print money and buy 1 million Bitcoin. This is all happening in the first 2 months and 1 week of a presidency, and everyone's shitting themselves.
Now, if you were talking to Joe Collateral right now, he'd say, well, they don't really print the money. It's debt. It's like, well, call it whatever you want, dude. It's more helium.
Joe Collateral is a friend, but he's one of these friends that's just anal about everything, you know? He's like one of these, he's a lawyer. So what do you expect?
He overthinks it. He overthinks it.
I don't, whatever. Like Joe's just, I call him Bear Joe most of the time. It winds him up. But yeah, look, Joe is Joe. What can you do? It's just one of those friends. You just gotta be like, all right, Joe, keep it up.
I like the tension though, because it helps me think through it really helps me think through my construct of, hey, could I be wrong? Because I'm so bloody allocated. Like when your thesis gets this strong and you don't allocate, I think this is the problem with some of the whales you talk about, the guys that came in Bitcoin before you, who you say, hey, maybe they just got L. Not everybody got L. They really knew, but if some of it's luck, you don't really step away and go, whoa, this thesis is the most extreme. I would feel ashamed if I didn't bet behind my belief system. Like,
Yep.
how many people have you known that they saw the trade, but they couldn't pull the trigger? 9
Too
out
many.
of 10 people.
Too many. They saw real estate. They saw equities. They saw Mag 7. They saw the tech boom. They saw Nvidia. They saw Bitcoin. They saw the meme coins. They saw everything, and they're still fucking broke.
Yeah. It's really
At
sad.
some
It's really, huh?
at some point, we live in a capitalist system. At some point, you have to look at your bank balance and go, did I actually get it or did I not get it? Sorry.
No, that's a fact. How does 4 years from now, how does India work through this, man? Let's talk about and then we'll end up. But India, 4 years from now, India and the UK, since those are areas that you're really familiar with, what happens to both those countries?
I think India is going to experience a drastic boom. It's going to be like kind of what China went through. I think China is going to see a drastic deterioration of growth rates here. And I think India is going to be a benefactor in that, protected by the US. Um, I think the UK, it saddens me to say this, but I think the UK needs more pain before there's a turnaround. It's weird to me that we can have, I'm sure you've seen his content, Gary's Economics, basically talking about how, you know, if you weren't born into a rich family in the UK, then you're basically going to be poor forever unless we tax all of the wealth um, of the wealthiest. And it's like, but they're fucking leaving. So whose wealth are you going to end up taxing, right? By the time you can get around to taxing it, being rich is going to be having a couple million in the bank in the UK. It's ridiculous what's going on right now. So the UK needs more pain. India is very strategic. India understands which way the sails are moving, and they'll partner and work with the US, I think, in order to get the result that they want. They've got a growing population as well. The UK doesn't. UK's got an aging population. What concerns me about the UK is that we've got an aging population that's basically like progressive and liberal, and we've got a young population that's kind of progressive and liberal as well. So it's like, how does by the way, I've been a lifelong Conservative Party voter in the UK against a lot of my family members, by the way. And I have decided that I will never vote for a Conservative Party candidate until they get their shit together. And that's because the Conservative Party was as bad as the Labour Party for the last 14 years. They've done nothing to increase the wealth of the UK. We had Brexit happen. We've done nothing to take advantage of that. There's probably 3 or 4 decisions that the UK needs to make to have a renaissance in the next half a decade. It would be very quick. A lot of people want to go to London. A lot of people want to do business in London. A lot of people want access to London. And the fact that, one American company has a higher market value than the entire UK stock exchange pisses me off. I don't know how else to say it. Pisses me off from my inner competitive side. There's so many things we could do. We're just not doing them. And by the way, it's not our current government, because we had a fucking conservative government for 14 years. We had a conservative government that delivered Brexit and then did nothing with it. So it's not conservative, it's not Labour, it's the mindset in the UK, and it needs more pain.
British, I actually, the truth is they're all the same people. They all
Yeah.
went to the same schools. They all have the same clubs. I mean, I lived there 14 years. A buddy of mine, we were drinking till 3 o'clock in the morning. He works at a monster bank there. And I said, come on, man, Jamie, come on, tell me the truth about the blue bloods. Let's face it, I'm never getting invited. He's on his second bottle, right? And he's like, Gary, there's most certainly a handshake, and you're never going to get it. And that's just the way the world's been for a long time. I think all that's getting ripped apart. To your point, hey, I think it's going to have to suffer more pain. I think your country is going to go through a freaking revolution, a violent revolution. I don't know how you get fixed, man. I love your country, and I would not go there. I would not go there today. Like, I fly easy, I stay at nice hotels. Dude, I would not go to London today. One, I don't even think you'd let me in. I've been so nasty, honestly, about your leadership. It's horrible. Your leaders are prostitutes, okay? Total parasitic vampires that are being told what to do, and they're destroying 70 million people's lives. It's a disaster, and you're watching it happen like right in front of you. Like, it's murder, man.
And by the way, just so you know, the previous leadership, that was the Conservative Party, were also prostitutes, and they were prostitutes for American private equity.
Totally.
Yeah. Like, so to me, it's like, you're all the fucking same. And until I've just now decided that the only person or party that gets my vote in the UK, left or right, doesn't matter, who is causing the most amount of trouble, because that's what we need in the UK now. We need the most amount of trouble caused, and then eventually we'll find some kind of equilibrium. But at this point, yeah, I mean, I was just in London over the last weekend for like 18 hours. And I kind of realized, I had this realization, it's quite emotional for me, if I'm being honest. It's the first time I haven't even tweeted about this. So I'll tell you, like,
an exclusive right here with Gary Cardone in British Hodl.
I walked past, I was walking around Buckingham Palace, and I walked past an RAF memorial. And there was a quote, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there was a quote on one of the pylons there, which basically said that, you know, our future is brighter than our past. And I had this overwhelming frustration, which was that, you know, in 30, 40 years, my patriotism for the UK has come from everything the UK has done in the past.
Right.
Right? We won World War II, Churchill, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things, all of these innovations, all these things that we've done have come from the past, because we've been afraid to be proud of the things that we can do and allow things that we can do to flourish. So all of that talent in my lifetime, in my entire lifetime, I can't name you one thing that I'm proud that the UK has done, looking forward in my lifetime. And so that's the one thing I'll say about that, the gift that President Trump is giving you guys, is the ability to be proud of what the US can create in the future. My country has done, in my opinion, everything possible to stay proud of what we have done in the past, then apologize for it, and then basically not give us any environment to thrive for the future. And all of the talent in the UK is leaving. The money in the UK is leaving. The streets aren't safe. And we're all sitting here going, oh, the UK is great. The UK was great. That's true. But we have all been brainwashed and programmed into understanding that all of the greatness of the UK comes from what it did in the past and not what it can do in the future. That is fundamentally demoralizing.
Yeah. Well, you're not doing anything. Like, I can't think of one thing the UK is doing that's like even finance, banking. You're not even doing that anymore. I mean, how's Canary Wharf doing? Has it become like a skeleton house, or like?
Yeah. That's where I got my start.
Is it all moving back to the city? And
Yeah.
that's just going to end up to be a dead zone out there?
Well, what people don't realize is that, like, a lot of the wealth, the UK still does great wealth management. It's just that a lot of the wealth management is sort of operated from the UK, but it's done outside. And we've done nothing strategically to allow ourselves to be competitive in the financial markets. We should have been doing, look, at the end of the day, one of the great things that I just mentioned about India is that they can see which way the winds are blowing to adjust their sails. And the problem with the UK has been we sort of left the EU and then tried to be friends with them, right? Whereas what we should have done is, as an independent nation, sort of assessed which way the winds are blowing and tried to become friends and align ourselves with the US. And I don't mean like in the little stupid things. I'm talking about like from a innovation perspective. We should have created tax incentives for US companies that want to have a British headquarters. We should have, there's so many things that we could have done to bring and make the UK basically like a tax advantaged outpost of the United States. And that would have brought immense wealth to the UK. And safety, for example, is absolutely one of those things. We should have focused on safety, which we haven't done. Just the perception of the safety in the UK's, look, generally speaking, you walk around the UK, nothing really crazy is going to happen to you. That doesn't really happen in other cities. But the way we've allowed it to be perceived is ridiculous. And we should have changed that. And these are things that are simple things that we haven't done.
Well, in fairness, I've been to almost every major city in the world. I would say that England was a very safe place to go. And
100%.
now to relegate it to, oh, it's just as safe. Nothing. This is what you just said, and no offense to you, but this is what human beings do. Hey, it's as safe as any other place.
Agreed.
Well, gosh, dude,
Every
that's a
other place
fucking
is shit.
100% degrade.
Yes.
I'm terrified. I can't wear a Rolex watch. I can't bring a nice woman. I can't bring my kids. They might get slapped by somebody. And then if I respond, I might get thrown in jail.
Yep.
I don't, it dawned on me the other day when we talked about taking over Greenland. I'm like, wow, the UK is completely fucked up because there's literally, if the UK offered it for $1 to the United States, my position would be, well, what are you buying it for? There's nothing there, man. There is nothing there but problems. I'd let somebody else clean up this shit.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's a couple different assets that we have that would be useful for the US.
What?
Well, I think the US would find extreme value in folding our wealth management side into the US. I think having it as an outpost of wealth management, sort of like a Singapore on the edge of Asia, I think that would be a very smart future for the UK. Look, at the end of the day, the UK, again, like I said, it's living in its past glory, right? And at some point, you got to realize that we've got to chart a new future. And what does that new future look like? Lee Kuan Yew had to do this when the UK basically dumped Singapore, and he turned it into what it is. And Singapore is a great country, right?
Right.
So it's what does the UK turn into? What are we focused on educating our people into? What do we care about? And we need smart people leading a country like the United Kingdom in order to do this, and we don't have that.
England's next election is like, you can't even fix this problem in the next 6 months, right? Y'all can't do anything.
It's a few years. And by the way, I just want everyone to know, I do not blame anyone in the UK for voting for Labour, because Conservative was a complete shit show. So it was due after 14 years. That was the protest vote that was needed, so to say. So we've got a few more years of this. Now, the good thing about it is that I think the US, at least from what I've seen and the rhetoric that I've seen, I think the US very much understands that the UK is a valuable partner in Europe. And we have a quote unquote special relationship. So I think the US is basically going to drag the UK along a little bit as much as it can. And then hopefully whenever we get good leadership, we can start the rocket boosters. So that's the benefit that I see for the UK right now, but nothing more than that at this point. We need something. We need something or someone to make British. And by the way, I live in Dubai now, right? I see all of the British people that I like to hang out with living in Dubai. These are ambitious. These are focused. These are traditional minded. These are people who believe that the UK is a great country. They've all just left. And here's the crazy part about it. Every person I ask, because I'm interested in this myself, I ask them, if the UK was as safe as Dubai, if the UK was as economically free as Dubai, would you move back? And 100% of the time, the answer is yes.
Yep.
People from the UK, British people love the UK. Trust me, I love the UK.
I
We
love
are
the
just
UK, man.
right. We are making terrible decisions that are not allowing people that want the best for themselves, their family, and for the UK to flourish. And if we started making those decisions, there are hundreds of thousands of Brits around the world that would flood back to the UK and make it a prosperous nation almost overnight.
I agree with you, man. I mean, the winner out of this is going to be Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. She's setting a very good example. I think if we had more leaders across Europe, if they're not all assassinated, I know it sounds really negative, but I think this is going to be a world of really severe polarization,
I
where
think
the
yeah,
difference between these politicians, really, we haven't had different politicians for 20 years. We need to have a real political difference. Like, oh, wow, this guy stands for this and this guy stands for this. And they're really different. They're not coming from the same fucking clubs, man.
yep. I think Maloney is great. I think her performance on immigration needs to be judged a little bit harsher than it is based on everything else she's doing. Because like Italy's just had to shut down its citizenship by descendancy program because they've allowed people to flood too many people into the country. And then they had to shut down people with real Italian lineage from applying for citizenship because they've apparently got too many people in the country taking advantage of the citizenship.
Yeah, of course. Well, on that, how do you like the $5 million program that they launched here to
Love
sell
it.
passports?
Yeah,
I think it's a
absolutely
good
love
idea,
it.
man.
Yeah, listen, look, if Bitcoin goes to, $1 to $3 million a coin, I would consider it. Because it just sort of the thing I liked about it, which I wasn't sure about, and again, it may change, it may be different to my understanding, but it appears that you can live inside of the United States and not be taxed on worldwide income.
That's right.
Um, and if that's the case, for five
This is a
million
better
dollars,
deal for you than it is for me, dude.
100%, 100%, it's a
100%.
great,
Like,
and
you
that's
can come
great,
in and leave. I can't. And
right?
I
And I'm
actually welcome that. I would love to have a bunch of Brits here, man. It would be awesome to have 1,000 Brits hanging around, a bunch of rich guys that know how to roll. Y'all bring
yep,
some class to this country. We get rid of Popeye's fried chicken, and we'll bring in the fish and chips. That's the only food we bring in from England, though, okay?
that's
Fish and
about it.
chips.
Anyway, the rest of the good food is from everywhere else in the world.
Hey, what do people think in Dubai about Bitcoin? Are they going stupid? And then we're going to close up because I know you got stuff to do, as do I.
Yeah, I think the Dubai government here is extremely positive on Bitcoin, is extremely positive on the US's developments on Bitcoin, is extremely positive on bringing people that want to innovate, want to do things for the future into Dubai. And I think the banking system needs to catch up. And I think they will, because the banking system's more sort of influenced by the US than anywhere else. And so as the US's banking system sort of opens up to Bitcoin, I think the UAE banking system will also open up. But yeah, massive forward thinking going on in the UAE. Like it's when you compare the UAE's forward thinking on Bitcoin versus the UK, it's like it's mind boggling. And yeah, it's just mind boggling what's going on. The government here is so forward thinking on everything. It's a pleasure to be here. Like it feels like a place where they kind of want you to succeed and they're open to helping you succeed.
Yeah, well, I think unlike England, who has a really long history, sometimes you can hold on to your history too long. I remember going to a conference in London, and the head of Barclays, 400 some odd year old bank, his opening line was he's a young guy, man. His opening line was, Barclays is a 400-year-old bank. This is 5 years ago. And I'm like, wow, that's your fucking opening line, dude.
Wild.
I am a dinosaur. And then when he goes through his pitch, it's like 400 years old. Now, I wonder if I asked him, what is your core business? After 400 years, dude, you have no idea what your core business is. It's changed so much. And I think that's a big dynamic going on. We have a lot of companies, millions of companies that are stuck in history and they're not moving. And I don't know how you don't have a lot of carnage here. You're going to have companies like Nike who lose 15%. Like maybe Nike's not going to survive this. Like I don't think Nike survives this. I don't think a lot of people making shit in third world countries, sticking a label on it, and then charging a 50% margin for it are going to survive. That is not value. That's a hoodwink.
Yeah, look, I mean, look, I said earlier that globalization was an idea of the US, but what it actually was, it was like globalization would not have happened at the speed that it did if it wasn't funded by the US.
Correct. Well, yeah, but they were trying to jam us into a trap.
Sure, but the US funded globalization, and now what Trump is doing is removing that artificial funding of globalization and allowing these countries to try and succeed on their own without that US subsidy, basically. And it's
Right.
like, would they have succeeded this fast, this hard, without the US subsidy? I don't think so. And so now Trump is basically saying, okay, well, let's see how you fare.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's breaking up because I think it was a trap. So we're lucky to have Bitcoin here for sure. We're lucky to have enough people that are standing up going, I'm going to fight against the system. And rightly so, because the more I study about our history, the more I realize, wow, I actually don't know the real story here. The real story has not been revealed to me. And I think it's pretty much not revealed to 7.9 other billion people. And we don't correct this until we know the truth, man.
Yeah, I've come to the conclusion that no matter which country you're in, that your country is finished when you're more excited about your country's past than you are about its future.
Yep. That's a great way to end, buddy. Hey, you guys, if you're not following British Hodl, good friend of mine, I met him through Bitcoin. This is another benefit I find through Bitcoin. In the last 4 years, I have probably obtained no less than 20 really good, high quality associates like him. I would use the word friend, somebody I can call and go, hey, man, what do you think about this idea? And he doesn't like smash it all over the industry. That's very unusual. I have not had the experience where I meet people all over the world in an industry and become associates and friends of them. An added benefit that I do not think is cooked into the $82,000 print we get on Bitcoin today. So I want to thank you for coming into my universe, dude. It's made my world a better place. Me having 1,000 Bitcoin and no friends and no people to talk to, who cares?
The point.
Me being an asshole with 1,000 Bitcoin, I know some of these guys. They're assholes. Who cares about them, right? But the value of being able to connect with a lot of really cool human beings all over the world like yourself, like I don't take that for granted, man. So
that's what
you.
life is about, right? That's what life is about. It's a pleasure to meet you as well.
Yeah, bro. Thank you, man. You guys follow
All
this cat. He's good. He's straight up. He won't give you any bullshit. Thank you, man.
See you later.
Yeah.